What would you do for an extra reaction? In this video, I'll be showing you an OP Duelist Prerogative build in Baldur's Gate 3. This will be using the Battlemaster Fighter, which actually uses this weapon extremely well. It gives us an extra reaction, which we can use for riposte, which gives us insane amounts of extra damage. Now, this weapon actually has some very interesting properties, which we'll be exploring in this video. It gives you an increased critical hit chance when your offhand is free, which was what we'll be doing in this video. It also gives us the Withering Cut ability, so on a hit with a melee weapon, you can use a reaction to deal additional necrotic damage equal to your proficiency bonus. Funny enough, this will actually apply a condition on the enemy, so things like the Boots of Stormy Clamor will actually trigger when we use that ability. But most importantly for us, and the reason that this is really good on this build over like an Eldritch Knight, is because it gives us a bonus action attack. This means that we get the 4 attacks as a fighter, and then we have two reaction attacks, giving us an extremely high damage output. And the nice thing about the fighter is it's just going to be a very simple, straightforward, and powerful build. It doesn't require too much thinking. You got second wind there. For our fighting style, dueling makes sense. This is a duelist build. It just gives us an additional 2 points of damage. I think defense makes more sense here. We need any benefit we can for not having a shield, so defense makes sense in this setup. Now for our stats. Since this is a finesse-based weapon, I think it makes most sense to go high in our dexterity. We're also going to be using a set of armor that lets us use as much dexterity as we want, so this works out very well. We'll also put our constitution to 16 and our strength at 14. You could alternatively take your points out of intelligence and put them into wisdom for the saves, as wisdom saves are highly important. Level 2 gives us the action surge ability. You guys know, extremely strong. Gives us an extra action for 3 more attacks once we hit level 11. Now for the subclass, I also recommend checking out my new Heartsworn Knight Fighter subclass that comes with a bunch of unique spells, but we'll be going with the Battlemaster, which is a very strong class, one of the most straightforward because of these maneuvers, and then most importantly, riposte here, which whenever you use this, you can expend a superiority die and your reaction to do an attack that does an additional 1d8 of damage. What's nice about this is when we hit level 10, it becomes a 1d10 for a bit more damage. We definitely want to have this one. Rally is another nice ability. If you have a teammate that went down, you can use Rally to pick them back up with a temporary health, and this can't be counterspelled, which is really nice. I also like to pair this with Menacing Attack, which can possibly frame the target, giving them disadvantage on attack rolls, and then they cannot move, and it gives you that additional 1d8 of damage as well. The Disarming Strike is another choice that I really like. A ranged Disarming Strike can be kind of nice, and you can have like someone quick on your team run by and steal their weapon, which obviously reduces their damage output quite a bit. I'm also a big fan of Trip Attack. If you have a rogue on the team, I would recommend grabbing this because knocking them prone sets up our sneak attacks, and a range shot to knock someone prone is pretty funny. Now, our first feat here. In all honesty, Savage Attacker is really good. Since we're going to be making so many attacks, we may as well reroll our damage die and just flat out increase our overall DPS. I also do want to mention Sentinel can work in the early game until we get the Duelist Prerogative if you want to run up build someone like this with like a rapier style weapon or really any type of weapon. Long reach ones like halberds would be great. I'm also going to mention that you could go with the alert feat. +5 to initiative is massive, but we do get another feat in 2 levels. And I'm also going to mention a dexterity based increase. Those would be like the top 3 feats we'd be looking for. Level 5, extra attack, big power spike in our damage. Level 6, however, this is our second feat where I'd recommend grabbing alert. I just think going first in combat is extremely effective, especially when we're like the main damage dealer. So yeah, alert, and then an alternative is the dexterity improvement. Another one I want to mention that's kind of funny is lucky, because you can make this doesn't use a reaction, and you can make it so that an enemy will miss you with an attack, which sets up a riposte. So if there's a target you really want to take out, you can kind of use this to your advantage. But I think the alert or the dexterity improvement are our best options at this point. Level 7, more superiority die, and we get maneuvers. For our next ones, I would recommend you can go with the Trip Attack again if you have a rogue on your team, and even Distracting Strike will set up advantage for the next attack roll, but this kind of works the same way. Pushing Attack is nice because this is going to push enemies back 4.5 meters, and you can get clever with your positioning using the ranged version of this. I also like to, again, grab Rally because this is just good. You're not going to use it all the time, but for a bonus action to pick up a downed ally, it's really great value. Level 8 gives us another feat here, and I would recommend to grab the Dexterity increase here. We're going to go with the highest possible Dexterity. Again, you can use Strength or even a Strength potion if you wanted to, but Dex gives us Initiative and Armor class, which 2 of those things we want on a fighter. We're getting Indomitable here at level 9. Reroll a saving throw, which can save your hide many times in a playthrough. Level 10 increases our superiority die to that 1d10, and we get 2 more maneuvers. At this point, Trip Attack's a solid choice, and Goading Attack can be nice. Precision Attack helps if you're not likely to hit an attack roll. It just eats up a superiority die, and then you get that added to your attack roll, so you're less likely to miss, which is nice, but I honestly think that Goading Attack, despite not working all the time, is sometimes a good thing to go with. But if you really desperately need a shot to hit, precision attack is just, I'm going to throw that on there just because it's so useful in the odd chance where you're like, do or die, need that hit, and you're not likely to do it. Level 11, this is the best subclass feature, or it's the best class feature. 3 attacks per action, and then we have our bonus action attack. We can do every single turn, and then 2 reaction attacks. We are pretty insane. The thing is, we can add an additional 1d10 to all those damage attacks, so except for our bonus action attack. So we do a lot of damage. And for our final one, I do want to again mention Lucky, which lets us set up the riposte really easy. Tough being a very solid weapon too, or feat I should say, to increase our overall health. But I just think that the dexterity-based improvement ends up being our best option. And the armor mod equipped is the Skirby's Royal Knight armor set. Now for our equipment, this is a late game weapon, the Duellist Prerogative, so we can use some other late game equipment here to complement this a little bit better, since this build's kind of typically focused for the late game, but you can obviously use this also in the early game. The Battlemaster Fighter is so crazy good, but Ballast armor plus this, it's insane. It doubles the damage that we got. There is some damage riders there, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But that can add a lot of extra damage onto our attacks, so the Ballast armor is definitely worth grabbing in Act 3. You can easily enough wear heavy armor too, and even things like the Armor of Agility will give us a solid armor class of 23 without a shield. This puts it to 20, but the trick is we want to actually attract as many people to attacking us as possible, since we are actually going to get that attack from them missing. So riposte being a requirement is the enemy has to attack us and miss, so we want to try and proc them into attacking. The lower our armor classes, the more likely they are. So pump your wizard, make sure he's got heavy, or like the Helldusk armor on so that he's getting targeted. Now, one funny thing, since you can use our reaction to proc the Boots of Stormy Clamor, I like to have the Thunderskin Cloak as well, because whenever a creature with Reverberation deals damage to the wearer, they become dazed. So that sets up wisdom-based wisdom saves like command and hold person to land a lot easier. I also am a fan of like the Shade Slayer Cloak. This is just going to give you increased critical hit chance, which actually is beneficial really only when we're hiding, but you can proc some extra damage off on that. It's kind of funny, it's a very rare item when there's things like the Duelist, or the Deathstalker Mantle, which are amazing. And then honestly, if we want a bit of armor class, you could go with the Cloak of Protection there. It's better than turning invisible, but even the Cloak of Elemental Absorption or the Cloak of the Weave can be good choices to protect yourself. It does use your reaction though, so a heads up on that. We also got the Mask of Soul Perception. Again, late game build, we need the extra ability to hit, but in the early game, Haste Helmet works great. And funny enough, the Diadem of Arcane Synergy actually works here because, as mentioned, the Duelist Prerogative's Withering Cut can proc not just the Boots of Stormy Clamor, but that as well, so can be kind of funny. I have the Boots of Stormy Clamor on here. Also, if you have the Illithid ability Drain, that can proc this as well. I also recommend the Disintegrating Nightwalkers or the Helldusk Boots in the late game. I'm also going to mention the Helldusk Gloves to add additional 1d6 of fire damage. Since we get so many attacks, we may as well take this item. Their Dark Justiciar Gauntlets can work well too for the 1d4 of extra necrotic. And if we're crit fishing, the actual best, since we can get both the Ballast Armor and the Crater Flesh Gloves together. When you get a crit, you get an additional 1d6, which is actually a 2d6 because it's a crit, so it gets an extra damage die. And that's all re-rolled, so insane amounts of damage. I have the Ring of Free Action on this build. One thing I want to mention is the free crit ring is actually kind of good here because, again, we're a crit monster with the double damage and the additional force and all the extra riders, which we actually add an additional 1d4 of damage against lately or heavily obscured targets with the Shadow Cloaked ring. So that's a 1d4 getting re-rolled and critical hits. We're doing some pretty absurd amounts of damage here. Another ring that I like, again, is the Ring of Free Action, Ring of Protection. And the Risky Ring will actually attract enemies into attacking us. So this can make for a really useful item because this is going to make enemies come towards us. It also, I guess, it gives a disadvantage on saving throws as well, which is actually kind of a bad thing, but it does trick the enemy AI into coming towards us, so that could be an option as well. If you got a racial passive like a Drow, you could use Strange Conduit Ring with Darkness and then get yourself a concentration for a 1d4 Psychic. And the fighter's got advantage on Constitution saving throws here, likely, or they got a proficiency in it, and with this amulet, we have the advantage. So yeah, if you're a Drow, you actually get a little sneaky there with that ring. And then you could also use the Boots of Striding so that we hold a concentration, don't get shoved around. It's kind of a funny combo, but it works. I also have the Hellrider Longbow. Again, we want to go first because we're a huge damage dealer. With this setup and the dexterity, we go first, guaranteed. And Duelist Prerogative. And when it comes to combat, so we got our bonus action attacks here and 2 reactions. We want to try and proc the reactions whenever possible. So riposte being really awesome in the fact that we can proc opportunity attacks and get this here. So we have lots of ways. I would not use the Withering Cut. There's like very small amount of times where that's good. Our Aura of Murder also applies our Boots of Stormy Clamor, so we have many ways to apply debuffs on the enemies. A single attack like that, you can see we got enough 42 damage to one-shot them. We don't need to use that Withering Cut, but if you want that debuff, or if they had like 4 health left, that's like the one instance, because that will take the enemy out, and that's obviously really nice. So you can see here, we did some pretty solid damage. It ended up being 21. With those rerolls and everything, that's pretty nice. So for a single attack, great. Now, the thing is, any target that has higher amounts of health, we can actually do some fun things with like a Disarming Strike here, which is going to do additional damage. I'm going to roll the crit just to see what happens here. And boom, 72 damage, 7 and 8. Yoinks, that's 36 piercing damage with a vulnerability. Don't need to use a Withering Cut. That was good. This target here is a little lower on health, so that's fine. We can just go with a regular old stab. I also want to mention that if you're a high elf, you have a really good time because you get Booming Blade, which does enhance this even further. Now, we don't have any other melee attackers. I should have probably procced one by running around, but I actually can't run back here because of the enemies. But that's not to worry because we have a lot of really good ranged attacks here, and one of the absolute best is the good old-fashioned arrow of many targets. If you crit on the first target, it'll actually crit every enemy and add that additional 2d6 of force damage. Another fun thing is if you're in close on an enemy and there's hold person, you get a free crit. An arrow of many targets means you get 4 crits. It's pretty insane. So you see here, crit, 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 and they all got those extra damage die, and we apply debuffs with our bow here. Now we have one more attack. That's the crazy thing about Fighter is you just get, it goes on and on. I can't understand how we last so long. Critical miss, but we got critical hits off on them. Somehow it added just the force damage from our glove there. And then you can just use a straight up attack here to finish off this target. We don't need to use your Withering Cut. And I want to do a little silly, goofy attack here where we proc an opportunity attack. So this is great. We got a miss. We got a riposte to finish them off. So then your character goes ahead, 50 damage. Crazy, crazy stuff. Yeah, we can use our action surge here, but I feel like this is overkill at this point. So we're going to do it. Action surge just being nice because you get a whole other action here. So this target doesn't have a lot of health, but we can use one of, we still have 3 Battlemaster superiority die. I would actually recommend not using them too often because we want to save them for riposte and rally. Those are kind of our the big 2 that we have. And I cannot move far enough to be able to reach them. So I'm just going to end my turn with 2 attacks left. That wasn't optimal, but one of the nice things is even if we're not in an opportunity to be able to use our reaction, Illithid abilities. This gives you 2 Sonic Backlashes, which is actually pretty insane. But Sonic Dominance, I would recommend grabbing both of those because you can stop a spell from being cast like Counterspell, which is one of the big benefits of the Duelist Prerogatives. That means that your Blade-Seeking Wizard gets an extra Counterspell. But the other nice thing is that with this build, we can shut those down just using Illithid abilities. Now, we're in a weird spot right now where I can't really run up on these or I'll get mind broken. So we're going to use some Disarming Strikes, which are really funny. If you had someone that can run by and steal their weapon, you can take it from them. We applied a debuff on them. Perfect. We're also going to go ahead and disarm this target. Critical miss, unfortunately. So we'll use the arrow of many targets, hoping for a free crit. We have the increased critical hit chance, not a high amount of damage, but it's something. And we can hit multiple targets at once to potentially debuff multiple targets. There we go. We got the crits rolling, and we'll just do that once more. Arrow many targets with the Ballist armor at close range is actually kind of insane, so I'd recommend doing that. We took that target out, and we have our final arrow here. Didn't disarm them, didn't hit them. That sucks. I wish I could go in there and do a Duelist Enthusiasm, but we can't, so I'm just going to go ahead and rally Shadowheart, because why not? Oh no, Command Grovel. Oh no, Indomitable. And we saved. Congratulations. That was actually pretty massive, because that is a big downside, but also the reason that I took the increased Wisdom point there is so that that does not happen. We still somehow have a superiority die, so we'll go with a Menacing attack, which I believe to be the best. What's funny is we actually knock them prone by walking towards them with the Aura of Murder. Whenever there's only like a single target left in combat, sometimes just using your reaction is more than fine. But that's hilarious. We actually took them out by walking towards them, applying the Aura of Murder, and our boots. These 2 items work together very well, but the Withering Cut can also reapply it, so we can get reverberation off on an enemy really easily. So that is the Duelist fighter build in Baldur's Gate 3 using the Battlemaster and the Duelist Prerogative. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have a great day. We'll catch y'all in the next one.